Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are on this fast forward planet, which sadly is still wrapped in a pandemic. In many parts of the United States and other countries, things are feeling somewhat normal, but of course, the planet is still mostly not vaccinated. The variant and future variants will be coming along as well. So there's lots of work to be done for public health going forward. And it's an overheating planet, as is pretty demonstrable when you look at weather patterns, coastal change, and urgency for action, both in places like Washington and soon Glasgow. And students increasingly are part of the conversation and the action. Campuses are spilling out into the communities around them. From Unity College in Maine a decade ago, where divestment started, to and also where students were doing weatherization on poor people's homes in Maine, all through this country and around the world. Students are a key part of this. You've seen, of course, with Fridays for Future. Here we are, Mondays for the Future too. And depending on where you are, I'm Andy Revkin at Columbia University's Earth Institute and now Climate School. Eban Goodstein is the director of the graduate program in sustainability at Bard College, which is kind of the hub for this Worldwide Climate Justice Action Teachin happening next March. And this is a briefing that will take you through a global look at what's happening and what you can do on your campus at various levels to engage, to teach, to get climate into the classroom. Also with us this morning and evening and elsewhere is, oh, I think my camera just turned off. We'll figure that out in a minute. Naciba Chassagnon, professor of management at ESSCA, School of Management in Lyon, France. And Chi Lin, good morning, good evening, actually. Wait, what time is it in France, actually? Oh, it's daytime, yeah.
It's 2 p.m.
Yeah, lunchtime. And Chi Lin, associate professor in literature, but now also sustainability education at Sun Yat-sen National University in Taiwan. I was pleased to spend some time in Taiwan 3 or 4 years ago, and it's a wonderful country. And it's great to have you here as well. We'll hear soon from Darren Rabinowitz, who's a teacher's college here at Columbia, who's coming on to give the student perspective. And also hopefully Carla Panyella, who's project coordinator, Center for Sustainable Development Goals at the University of Los Andes in Colombia. So Eban, I'm going to turn it over to you just briefly to explain how this came about, and I'll figure out my camera in the meantime.
Thanks, Andy. And it's a pleasure to be here with colleagues from around the world. Climate change impacts are accelerating. It's been a nightmare of a summer for many people around the world. And I think there is just a rising sense of worry and concern and fear and urgency among people across the planet. And what do we do with that? How do we address that? And as educators, we really have a special role to play because we have kind of the intellectual leadership role. And our sense was that with the rising numbers, tens, hundreds of thousands of climate concerned educators around the world, that we need to work with each other and that we're going to be stronger together. And so for the last couple of years out of Bard College, we've been running a project called Solve Climate by 2030. During the pandemic, a lot of this work has been web-based, and we've been coordinating and helping universities host hundreds of webinars on green recovery, climate solutions, justice in the transition, from Taiwan to France to Malaysia to Kenya, South Africa, Germany. And we've actually built a pretty good library, a global library of solutions online. Experts, youth voices, indigenous folks from around the world talking about what climate solutions looks like in their parts of the world. We need to up our game. We need to kind of take this to scale, move beyond the hundreds of folks who've participated to really create a platform for thousands of educators to bring their communities together, and also reach beyond the 30 or so students that will typically show up for some kind of a climate lecture or film or discussion. Because as you know, and as we all know, we're living at this truly extraordinary moment in the history of the human species. And no generations before us, I think, have had the level of agency that kind of we have right now, because the work that we are going to do and that the students are going to do in the next year or 5 years or 10 years or 15 years is going to impact the future in ways that, you know, no other generation before them has had that opportunity, for good or bad, right? Inaction or action,
Right.
whatever we choose, will profoundly impact the future. And we just really have the obligation as educators to let students be aware of just how important this moment is, and how they can get involved. So that's the vision of the Worldwide Teachin, a call for a Worldwide Teachin on climate and justice, set for March 30th, 2022. Our vision is to get 1,000 colleges, universities, high schools, middle schools, faith communities engaged on or around that day. And at each venue, bring hundreds of students together, not dozens or a couple dozen, to really focus on what we can do in our communities, you know, as citizens, as voters, but also as you know, people who are about to go out into the workforce, and, you know, the work that we're going to choose. And I'll just end this introduction by referring to Naciba's experience in Lyons last year. It's a story I've been telling a lot, about an engineering student who came up to her after one of their events and said, you know, I'm about to graduate. I was going to go work for heavy industry, the oil industry. I can't do that anymore. And I want to put my talents to use solving this problem. And this is really the conversation that we're trying to spark. And that's kind of a brief introduction. We can talk more detail about strategy, tactics, how to get involved.
That's just great. So what is this like in France? And do you share here, there's this very potent sense, at least in the media, maybe not in the student body itself, of despair being the leading emotion? I don't know, Naciba, in France, is there a similar sense of what's the emotional landscape like on campuses, and how hard is it to turn things to this productive frame?
Actually, my students are very enthusiastic about the Solve Climate initiative, and we started to talk about the teach-in, and they want to get involved because they're not desperate. They're just waiting to, you know, have solutions to try to, you know, structure to have a methodology actually to, you know, intervene, to know how to act upon climate change. So they're not desperate. They just, you know, they're waiting for someone or, you know, institutions to tell them how to lead on these topics, actually. And as Eban said, I was very surprised, because even if the majority of our students have a sensitivity about environmental studies and ecological issues at ESSCA, and Grenoble University too. But when we organized the first time last year, the Solve Climate in March, actually, the Solve Climate initiative in France, a lot of students came to us to, you know how they could take the internship that Bard was suggesting to take, and how to, you know, stay committed to the initiative.
That's great. And one thing I wanted to stress is this, it sounds like this is a multi-level approach. It's not just colleges. Chi-Lin, you're working in sustainability education and in Taiwan, and also, again, for the background in literature. So just briefly, tell us a little bit of the landscape of interest in Taiwan. What are things like there? What are students asking about?
Yes, climate change is in everyone's concerns now, because we suffer from real and immediate impact because of the Taiwan location, the location of Taiwan. Could I show the slides? Yes,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah.
Right.
Tell me when that's centered. Perfect.
Yes, can't you see Taiwan's here? So it's
Oh,
we are in a very sensitive and vulnerable position because we face Pacific Ocean and bordered with Asian continent. So it's so we are sensitive to all natural changes, and climate change make the damage, intensify the damage of environmental problems. So in the campus, so thank you, Eban, for sorry.
that's okay.
Yes. Okay. So thank you, Eban, for inviting us to participate in the global climate project, and because we can get people informed and get everyone to share their experience. So, and students here in the campus, they initiate action to identify viable approaches, and from change our daily behavior to a bigger scale like green chemistry research. Yes, so it's we really suffer from the climate change disasters. Like this year, we have like from drought in April, and then mud floods in the summer. So it's cost many lives and their homes. So now it's real. The problem is so
Right.
real.
Yeah, we've both in South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, and the United States, extreme flooding has been a real problem. You know, we lost people in basements in New York City who that issue of resilience to me has been not sufficiently focused on. A lot of the focus was on decarbonization, which is immensely important and tough challenge, but there's much that can be done, whether it's on a campus or in any community, to build resilience at the same time. I don't know if that's part of the framing, even. You know, when you think about one thing I found is that when people get paralyzed by climate crisis,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's such a big concept.
Yep.
So then when you start to break it into pieces, building a resilient community, energy change, it starts to become much more of a landscape of opportunity. I don't know if that feels like part of what you're working on.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the framing of this is, you know, this originally came out of a project called Solve Climate by 2030, and we threw that out there. It's a obviously provocative kind of frame. But what's really interesting and kind of, I think, exciting about this moment and makes me more I don't know, hopeful is the right word, but there's more possibilities than there were 5 or 6 years ago, just because of the kind of technology tipping points that we've crossed, right? And so we're at this point where, you know, for many years we were looking to national governments, the international community for leadership to kind of impose some global cap and, you know, have policies that would raise the price of dirty energy, and all that seemed very critical. But the price of alternatives has gotten so cheap, and it's getting cheaper, so that as we forecast out, you know, another 10% drop in solar prices every year for the next 5 years, huge opportunity has emerged at the local level
Right.
for both solutions, but also sort of thinking about, you know, adaptation and resilience. And so the focus of the teach-in, at every teach-in, kind of the last hour, should be focused on what we can do. And the we is typically, you know, community level work at the university, within the town. You can obviously blow that out to the national level or the international level, but so much of the work is really just about deployment of solutions. And that is by definition kind of local work, you know, ensuring that your zoning laws are allowing rapid deployment of solar in ways that are smart and sensitive, and that you're building out the battery infrastructure, but that you're also sort of creating policies to take care of vulnerable people, something we've learned a lot about in COVID. So, you know, that focus on what you can do in your community, in your town, on your university, has suddenly become more important because we're no longer, you know, sort of in this world where we have to raise the price of fossil fuels above all, right, in order to make clean technology competitive. It's competitive now, right? And so it's more barriers and obstacles deployment than it is about some national cap or some global price on carbon. So I think that's exciting, and it's part of the focus of the teach-in.
I'm going to bring in the student from Teachers College just to start that part of the discussion too, Darren Rabinowitz. Darren, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks for inviting me, Andy.
And just describe briefly, like, what level are you at, and what comes to mind when you think about this?
Sure. So I am a first-year doctoral student at Teachers College, studying international and comparative education. My research focus is environmental education and climate change education. And I also am a research associate at the TC Center for Sustainable Futures, that's led by Dr. Oren Pismoni-Levy. And some things that come to mind, I did my master's degree at Teachers College in 2018, and we did an in-depth study of students and their perceptions of sustainability and their learnings around sustainability at the college. And some of the findings were a bit shocking in terms of several departments, students who are from these departments, about 2 departments out of the 8 departments, don't learn a single thing about sustainability or climate change in their learning as a graduate student.
Yeah.
And this is shocking as we think about the future professionals who are in the fields of education, psychology, and public health, and the limitations they might have as professionals in the field if they don't learn anything about these topics when they're thinking about policies or curricula, or if they're superintendents of schools. So the ripple effects of not being able to learn at these professional institutions is alarming. So I want to include the other aspect of, yes, there's the global, but also what is happening amongst the students, and what are the students' concerns here that are coupled with the global movements here that we're also embarking on with this global teach-in. And so I think it's all the more important to couple what is happening on campus and what students are demanding and asking for, and that's not seen and mirrored with their learning. So I think it's really important, this teach-in that's happening, to create these kind of linkages and ways for students and professors and educators, administrators and faculty to come together to be able to have these interdisciplinary conversations around climate change.
Actually, taking that over to both TE and Naciba, one of the sort of visions behind the teach-in is to really engage faculty across the curriculum as sort of the intellectual leaders of the campus. And the thesis is that there are lots of climate concerned faculty. And they're not just climate scientists. They're literature professors, they're artists, they're biologists, they're economists. And how can we tap that level of concern, bring people together for this one-day event, but then also enable them or mobilize them to hashtag make climate a class, on a regular basis, so that you're always talking about climate change in your psychology class or your art class or your education class. So I'd love to hear from Chi and Naciba about how you see that from an international perspective. Do you agree that there's a lot of climate concern among your faculty broadly, and do you feel like you can tap that in this teach-in?
Yes, actually, I'm lucky because in the last past years, what happened is that all professors, even we have a partnership with the School of Engineering in Lyon, in France, and even engineers, actually professors that teach engineering, are concerned, by these issues. So we are lucky on that side. However, what you said, Darren, about what is happening among students, what they need, what they are thinking, is very important, I think. And when we asked our students last year, after the Solve Climate by 2030 initiative, what would you include, in the courses to know how to lead, a project like this on climate change? And they said, okay, so today, Professor Naciba, you're teaching ethics and you're teaching classes and courses on environmental studies. But what we believe is that we should have, include these concerns in all courses. So could we have a way, to include this topic in all courses, engineering classes, also, in finance and mathematics, etc. So we are thinking about this. It's not easy because we have to train actually young faculty members. So this is my take on this.
Maybe Chi, did you want to add on that too?
Yes. So my students in the climate change course, they are now launch a kind of interview through faculties to interview 20 teachers from different faculties to talk from their perspective about their understanding of climate change and also the consequences and solutions. So because we think only through like voice different opinions that we can really work together. So that's the action, like make climate a class. And even in the list, they ask really from like a scientist teacher to a physical. We have like a PE teachers also to how to build a resilient society. And because we saw there's no one single solutions to solve climate change, but all solution matters because that represents what climate change means to the local communities. So we like to collect as many solutions because all solutions present the problem we encountered, the challenge we encountered, and how we can do. Yes, so that's the faculty engagement from like different dimensions, even the cultural dimension. Like in Taiwan, we have a soft policy to advise people not to burn that much spirit money. I don't know if you know the title. Yes, so to reduce from the cultural dimension as well. So that's really, I look forward to the diversity from the interview of the faculty members.
So just recognizing that when you burn spirit money, you're releasing carbon into the atmosphere. Is that sort of the idea?
So we need to like a change from our heart. Yes. So that's the lots of approaches. And I mention, like, I particularly appreciate one podcast by Andy about identify indigenous people as one of the strategy solutions. I don't know from that you interview indigenous situation in Indonesia. Yes, I show that to my friends, to my students and colleagues. Yeah, so that's also one if you preserve indigenous, like the diversity, that's also one effective solution to participate in this project.
Well, what's exciting about that is this gets to something Eban said, which is that we have a unique opportunity now that didn't exist maybe 10 or 15 years ago, which is when we talk about community now, it can and should be the community right around your school, but the community really is global. You can have a live conversation with people in Indonesia. I've done those webcasts here through Colombia with indigenous people in Guyana and the Amazon. And there are students. There's a guy, Dan Hammer, who's a technologist who's built a project called Earthrise.education, where students, high school students, actually middle school students in Massachusetts and Iowa, were looking at satellite data of the Amazon and finding evidence of illegal activity going into an Indian reserve. And then that became a story and a Reuters article. And so students can get directly engaged, with the community globally now in ways that weren't conceivable.
Well, one of the strategies in terms of kind of embedding climate change across the curriculum that we experimented with over the last year was this idea of making climate a class. And so our thinking was, here's something that very easy for climate activists to do who are students, which is just every semester make a practice of sending emails to all their teachers requesting that they devote an hour to a focus on climate change in their class. And we one of the things we're doing for this project is we have a massive open online internship called Social Media for Climate Activism that will run this year from January 15th to March 30th. It's an open call. We had about 400 students from around the world that wanted to participate. We started out with about 200, and then it sort of boiled down to about 150. But once a week that we gather in a synchronous conversation about sort of learning how to do social media. And then students devote 3 hours a week to actually doing it in support of the Worldwide Teachin. And so we tried to push out this social media campaign of, make climate a class. And it turned out that it was a little scary for students. They just really wouldn't do it. It was easy to do. We felt like it was an effective strategy, but it wasn't fun. It wasn't exciting. It was kind of scary. And so we need to figure out how to break through that if we're really going to get that sort of grassroots student energy driving faculty engagement in this Make Climate a Class idea. But I mean, ultimately, it's not that hard, and it doesn't require that much training to bring a disciplinary perspective to bear, right? At least at a level of an hour's conversation. And on our website, we've actually got in 3 different languages, thanks to Naciba and others, in Spanish, French, and English, sort of ways to turn a psychology class into a climate conversation. And it really relates back to the despair question, Andy, that you started with, right? What is the what is the dominant? What do your peers think? Are they in despair? Are they determined? Are they checked out? And if so, if they're in despair, what do psychologists say about that? And what are the strategies for moving beyond that? So similar with art, music, music, Andy, I think here's a good question for you as a musician. Why don't we have a climate anthem? Every other social movement has had a song that people sing. Some of you may have been watching that show, the most popular show on Netflix, right? The one with the bank robbers in Spain, and they sing that song. So everybody's got a song, but there is no climate song. Why not?
Yeah, I wrote about that a long time ago at the Times, my .earth blog, about does the environmental movement need a new song? And I think it's there. It's just that music has become kind of like so many aspects of life, very fragmented.
Yeah.
Back in the day when you and I were growing up, Eban, and maybe our colleagues, you'd turn on a radio station and you'd hear the Four Tops, and then the Rolling Stones, and then Bob Dylan, and then it was all part of the common. It was like the nightly news that we all listened to, and now music is like my son's music is like a completely different language and layer from my music, and I think maybe that's part of it. I'm just maybe I should do a show on that.
I think
forward.
You should. We need that song pretty badly. So if you can do anything to facilitate it, it would be great. But the point here is that there is an entry point for colleagues across the curriculum, and they need to step up and get involved. And once again, the thesis behind the Worldwide Teachin is that they do exist, and that's sort of. Let me just talk a little bit about what we mean by a teach-in, right? What is a teach-in? And we've actually had interesting conversations about how to translate the word teach-in, because there doesn't really seem to be. It is sort of an English language word that reflects back to the 60s, but really it means an opportunity, an educational opportunity that is really community-led. It doesn't involve bringing in experts. It doesn't involve, top-down lecturing or one-way information delivery. It really involves, it's a very kind of collaborative, discussion-oriented sort of event. And so, so anyway, what we really are looking for in these teach-ins is to mobilize, dozens of faculty at every institution who can talk about global warming as a psychologist or as an artist or as a musician. And that will help the students feel like they can enter into that conversation, that you don't have to be a solar engineer, right. To sort of play a big part in the solutions conversation. So we're really trying to just generate real discussion in a 3-hour setting. And we've got models on our website, both for the high school level, the university level. We've got one coming actually with a partnership from the not the Earth Institute, the Center for Earth Ethics at Colombia is helping us develop one for faith communities. So what we really need right now, is to open this conversation up and tap into the climate concern that everyone is feeling, and really open pathways to people to get involved. And see that this is, it's not something we're going to solve overnight. So you have to figure out how to build a life strategy around working on this politically, from a career perspective. That's the only way to deal with it.
So I'd like to hear from Darren a little bit on, because I know the Oren and the Teachers College Sustainability Group is working with, for example, in New York City, there's a network of sustainability coordinators, hundreds of people who were tapped to be coordinators at schools. But even those who have that title sometimes have a hard time knowing what to do and fitting it into their existing obligations. My wife works in this field too, teaching teachers how to insert sustainability concepts into their existing lesson plans at the K through 12 level. So how much of this has to fit into a teacher's life in ways that might not be easy? Are you working on that question there with Oren and others?
Yeah, so I am. It is interesting because I actually I did a case study on a school in Sunset Park, and I spoke to one of these sustainability coordinators who was doing exemplary work. She is a science teacher, and applying for grants and getting students involved, even to the point that students were going from classroom to classroom, checking how well the students are recycling and actually giving each classroom a grade. And so you'd walk around the school and you see A, C, B, and that's based on how well the students were recycling in that particular classroom, and the students themselves were giving the grade. So this culture at the school was very much alive with all the students. When they would go to the cafeteria, they would eat in circular tables and also come to the trash cans and sort the garbage. And then the school was completely vegetarian as well. There was no meat served at the school at all.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's in Brooklyn, right?
It's very important. And the students this is elementary school, and the students took immense pride in the fact that they didn't have meat at their school. It was not offered. So I spoke to the person who managed the cafeteria, and it's interesting how the network of educators to the cafeteria to the principal all contribute to the culture of the school. And I think that this was an exemplary case, but I do think that the strong commitment and the partnership between the sustainability coordinator, the principal, and the facilities operator, and the parents of the students themselves, all created a community where this mattered. And then the trickle effect of how the school was a node for change in the community, and local businesses were getting involved. And I think that it's fascinating to think about how schools can be the change agent in communities and having that ripple effect outwards rather than communities coming in and shifting and changing the school. There's definitely both ways can be seen, but to the sustainability coordinator program, it's been really fascinating to see how teachers or whomever takes on the position of sustainability coordinator, because it's a volunteer position at this time, but all schools must have them, can really rise to the challenge. And then there's complications in compensation about their time and taking more work on. But I do think that there's so much to explore here as a policy, as an urban policy for combating climate change, to ensure that there is a point person in every school that's job it is to figure out how can students get involved in climate change learning.
Can I just jump in? Oh, I just want to jump in and let just people know, I realize we haven't even mentioned our website, which is the worldwideteachin.org. And if you'd like to learn more about the Teachin, please just go to worldwideteachin.org. We're looking for you to sign up your schools as soon as you can. We've got about 100 bubbles on our map, flags planted, and we're trying to get to 1,000. So if you want to participate in March, you don't have to know exactly what you want to do. You could just say, I'm going to step up and I'm going to get my student involved in one of these teach-ins. just please put your bubble on the map, plant your flag, let others know, because it is that demonstration effect. It's like I look across town and I see that, you know, the high school across town is doing this. I feel like I need to do this. And it's that leadership out from the schools to the community that's really important. And we're urging colleges and universities, for example, to actually invite high school students to come up to their teach-ins. Great way to recruit students in addition to sort of providing that education level. And you were going to say something, but I was actually curious if I'd like to hear how does the word teach-in translate into Chinese and into French? Does it make sense, or is it easy to communicate that idea of something a little more grassroots and a little more less top-down?
Good question.
Chi, what is the literal translation of teach-in that you're using?
Yes, actually, I had like a 30 minutes discussion with my students on the class. So we Google like from Wikipedia to about teaching, because it started like from 60s. It's very like a how citizen can participate to express in like a sit-in or lie-in or teaching. Yeah, so we really learned. So we translated as to, yes, minutes ago I was trying to find my slide, like a co-discussion.
A co-discussion.
Like co-discussion, yes, with not just experts, but also citizens. Yes, so everyone has a voice there. So co-discussion on climate justice. Yes, so that's the teach-in. So everyone's sleeping or lying. So we lie in a little bit. So still ask me, could we lie to participate? I say, yes, you can.
And how about in France, en France?
Okay, so in France, we called it journée éducative en faveur du climat. It's longer, but it's because actually in France, culturally, we have conferences, you know, or seminars. And if it's a teach-in, it's very original, actually, you know, it's in between. So we didn't know what to do. So to, you know, explain to people that high school students are welcome, professionals are welcome, faculty members are welcome. Actually, everyone is welcome in this, you know, teach-in. So we called it like this. It's you know, a day where I'm translating right now, a day where we're going to learn something about climate change and climate justice, you know. So, and maybe the subtitle will be Les Soirées du Climat, because it will be at 8 p.m., I think. So it will be the evenings on climate change, you know.
Yeah, we call it, the actual teach-in is, the model we have is the one-night climate teach-in. So that's sort of a 3-hour vision at the university level, the high school level. And as I mentioned, we've got one coming for faith communities.
There's a question, some really good questions and comments have come in. Adina Mirrenlander, who earlier, I'll just show her earlier comment too. She says there's a book here that community scale action is the key to transformation and counters despair with the joy of working together. See stories of these actions and their connections to climate science in our new book, Climate Stewardship, part of the University of California Climate Stewardship Program. And then she added here, teachers benefit from adult education on the subject, continuing education, professional development to increase their comfort and self-efficacy. That feels important too. I don't know whether that's happening yet in Taiwan or France. It's certainly happening here to a small scale. And there is I'm just going to show a resource here that the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, there's a guy, I can't remember his name, there's this CLEAN network. It's basically climate learning, which feels, it's been around for a very long time. And it feels very much like a resource that can help as well.
Is that Frank Neal?
Yeah, Frank Neal, exactly.
Yeah.
I think he's been on this journey for a long time. So there are resources out there, at least here, and that finding teachers, getting them freeing them to have the time to do these things is really an important question too. especially at the lower levels, maybe. But even on campus, young scholars on campus have a hard time at universities finding the time to devote to things like this.
Yeah, although I would say, Andy, that's kind of an excuse. I mean, honestly, it's simple for any professor to say, I'm going to take 1 hour out of my syllabus and I'm going to focus on how climate change impacts or psychology intersects with. This is not rocket science. I mean, everybody reads the newspaper, and you're not talking about so anybody can do this. And I think that is the key, right? We all feel like we're living in this climate emergency, and we don't know what we can do. But as educators, we can do a lot, and we just really need to take the initiative to pull that together. And what we discover is that working together through the teach-in, it just motivates. It's community, right? As your commenter just said, right? It's so much more fun to do this with other people than to sort of do it by yourself. And you're inspired and you want to go further when you're engaged with colleagues around the world. So part of what we're building here through the teach-in is this community, global community of climate educators, or climate concerned educators. I'm not sure we all consider ourselves climate educators, actually, because we're just educators who want to bring climate into what we're talking about, because this is a long game, right? We have to inspire a generation of young people to, on the one hand, deal with all the crap that's coming at them, right? I mean, all of the impacts that are, accelerating, but on the other hand, to sort of figure out how to stabilize the climate, but how to manage through that. So, it's just got to be part of our conversation. And as educators, there's just nothing more important right now. And I will say that in the next 5 or 10 or 15 years, this is the most important thing we can be talking about. All the other issues of humanity, we're going to be at them for the next 50, 100, 1,000 years, right? Trying to get those right. But this one, we have a window to get right. And for people who understand that, we have to work together, we have to engage, and we have to do as much as we can to communicate that understanding to our students.
That's so true. And I guess that gets back to what several of you mentioned, which is finding entry points or examples that can give teacher the that sense of comfort, that knowing that climate is in every part of the syllabus, every part of the curriculum. It's psychology, it's technology, it's business, and finding your place in that seems like, as Eban was just saying, all it takes is an hour of reflection, maybe 5 minutes of reflection, to realize that we're surrounded by the climate story and climate action or inaction. That seems so where is this? I guess, again, I'm just going to show the hashtag too for those who are on social media. Make climate a class is the hashtag for this effort. So that's a convening point. It's a way to at least know who else is out there, who is a teacher at your level. You can create those conversations yourself. That's why I think this is very valuable. I'm going to show you one example of something that I stumbled at. I went to a high school in the Bronx, where climate had come into it's actually a high school of energy and technology. It's a specialized high school for young people in the city who, need career tracks. And they, let me just show you this, because I think it conveys effectively this idea that this story, this opportunity is everywhere. And here, hold on. Basically the class was going into the boiler room of the school, and the teacher for the day was the custodian. He gave the lectures. He told us that this is how the school stays hot and cool. This is how much oil we use. This is a school, like many in New York City, that was using coal. They were actually burning coal in the building.
Wow.
Until this New York City, the history of schools, right up until the 1990s, there were schools in New York City still burning coal in a furnace in the basement to keep the school hot. And so the energy history of that school and the future of that school is right there to experience, and that can be in literally any campus on the world.
Yeah.
Has a heating and cooling plant that's just sitting there waiting to be explored. And that's just one of the food system for a school, as you were saying,
Sure.
or no, as Darren was saying, is a entry point. As is what are we studying this week? The actual learning.
Well, you're involved in a broader sustainability education program, right? So is this something you do? Do you do this kind of campus as a laboratory work where students explore the food system, explore the energy system of the university?
Oh, yes, actually, there are so many factories in my city, but like use coal burning facilities. So now we need to have innovative. So I brought them to visit, because we are trying to have new strategy to cut it down, because the carbon emission is a really major carbon emission, and also air pollutions kind of issues, and also we have actually like a disaster memorial sites to see the consequence of climate change, and then to think backward to identify the problems in the past and to move to future. So that's a connection, like informal education systems, which I think quite. Yes.
What is the disaster memorial site
most of them like a mud flood after the whole. It's really tragic story. We have so many tragic stories. Sorry, I couldn't talk much because I will feel emotional.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so that's 10 years ago. Okay, so as I mentioned in the beginning, Taiwan is quite vulnerable to all natural changes. So like mud floods, they were bury the whole village in one night after the rain, the after typhoon. So and then because that's also human intervention if we trace what is the cause of the catastrophe, it's always human interventions. Yeah, so that's not to just so to visit coal burning factories, but also to visit all the consequences, which tragic too. So that's a thing to learn from, that's the meaning of. It's quite sad to say that's yes. So to see how we can change, make different choices, yes, in the very beginning, instead of prevent the consequences. Yes, I don't know if that so that's the school outing, the school outings, but also collaborate with experts from the government, or it's bring in, I like to respond as the lady donor lies. So how could with community members, always the source of learning, like experts and also teachers, one of the citizens. So everyone learns together in this uncertainty, of the climate change. Yeah. So I don't know if I, yes. So I really, yes. So it's, for me, it's quite familiar. Actually, there's a coal burning system in many parts. I suppose Taiwan is not alone. And that's the system to change.
Yeah.
Yes, to change to a different thermal boiling systems. Yes, for new technologies. Yes. And then this. So sorry, could I add one thing? I think for climate, it's that to learn how to trust scientists as well. So that's the thing we need to work on, to trust scientists and to have cleaner information, actually, to get to know how to participate. That's our experience here. Yes.
And tell us about the lack of trust of scientists. I mean, what does that come from? Or
yes, like a climate change. Okay, so the uncertainty always mingle with political policies or political power, and then so sometimes even though we know the green energies will be beneficial to the community health or well-being, but there's a power struggle and conflicts all the time working on. So it's an opportunity we thought to promote a kind of general trust, a public trust or discussion, a kind of participant in the new technologies from the citizen non-expert level. Yes. So I like to work. Yeah, we like to work. Yes, on this level actually. So we use referendum actually, but in Taiwan we have referendum system to vote for like a green technology or something, but it's still in a very young kind of stage and lots of stupid choices happening. So yes. So that's also another level of like how to involve non-expert like us, how to get involved and to trust the scientist. Yes. Sorry. Yes, I
No,
go from
that's so
yes.
important.
Yeah.
Yes.
That reminds me, we haven't really discussed civic science and citizen science yet, that direct engagement of students in the process and building those relationships with science. Public health, there's projects in New York City and many cities now where students have these air monitors and they can go out and directly report on the air quality, for example. I'm sure, Eban, that must be in that map of projects. It's, there's the activism, there's politics, there's data.
Yeah.
What are the key things? I'll show that map one more time of Europe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I should mention that this project is supported by the Open Society University Network, of which Bard College is one of the co-conveners. And as part of that broader project, we have a citizen science initiative that's involving actually students across the world collaborating in air quality monitoring and sharing data. And so that's part of this work. And it's a great way for young scientists, but also it just, I don't know, it's a great piece in the Times last year where they followed two young people in India, and they monitored their air quality throughout the 24-hour days. And there was, one young man who lived in a lower income neighborhood, and, he was exposed to sort of 4 times as much air pollution as the wealthier girl, who was, of course, exposed to 4 times more air pollution than people in the United States. So sort of those technologies can really start to tell really powerful stories. But yeah, here's our map. We need you to sign up as quickly as you can, because the more flags we have on the map, the more flags we're going to get. It is very much a psychology of participation. And once again, you don't have to know exactly what you're going to do. You can sign your school up and just say, we're going to be involved in the teach-in. And then you can go to our website and find kind of models for how to do this. It is a climate emergency, but we also recognize that people have limited bandwidth, and that's part of the challenge. So we've created models that are actually easy to put together. They don't take long, but they're sort of guaranteed to get you an audience of several hundred students. So that's part of kind of the work we're doing, is creating platforms that make it easy to engage your community and bring people together as a launching point for these bigger conversations about how to truly embed climate conversation across the curriculum. And Naciba, you're actually at a business school, correct? And how is it playing out in that environment?
Actually, today we are trying to figure out, a way to include environmental issues, as I told you, as a tool, a comprehensive tool for our students. So that when they become professionals, when they work, when they will be out there, they actually will have, some comprehensive tools every day. But yes, we're trying to be realistic. And for me, the teaching is also, a way to open the floor to all disciplines so that, they learn from the experience of teachers, professors, people who have different expertise. So yes, I think that we have a lot of work to do, but we have a window, as you said, right? In the following months. So yes, I think it's a challenge to include this in all courses and to have realistic tools, comprehensive tools, and also, the faculty members that we will have to at some point to train so that they can also talk about it.
And when you say all courses and disciplines, you mean within the management school?
Yes, of course, because I am sensitive to these issues because, I have this sensitivity because of my cultural background, because of my history, but all people are not like this. And I think that we have to lead, when there are topics like this. It's also a political topic in France today. Yes. And I think what I mean is that, according to the town you're in, if you're a teacher in a high school where, there's not much financial subventions, environmental issues are not going to be your priority. So this is what we have to, think about when we actually organize the teaching. And we reached out in France to all these high schools so that teachers can come in too, and collaborate with us. And at some point at ESSCA, or even at the university, I think we will be happy to welcome teachers from high school and also high school students. But yes, in France, it's a political issue. It's a huge political issue.
I think everywhere in the world, is the politics around global warming isn't happening, or what to do about it?
I think that, as you know, I don't know if you know that it's an election year, and yes. we have actually a lot of activism that is going on also in town that is not always, well understood. So this is why I think that really having, an educative platform on this comprehensive tools, explain why we have to do certain things now, to change things. I think that this is very important for education, because I think that, a lot of people don't understand that there is actually an emergency. But not necessarily because of their education or their background. It's also because we cannot see immediately what's happening, yes. Yeah.
So the yellow vest movement is part of the
we moved past that now, and we have another bigger problem, I think. It's an election year, and people are using this, to go not beyond, climate change. I'm very disappointed, actually. I think we have to act now, and they're using these topics to divide people. And I think that our role as professionals, as professors, as researchers, is to tell the truth, the documented truth. And I think the teaching helps a lot.
Great. There was a question earlier that came in from Aviva Romani. How do you deal with the rise of denialist populism? Whether you call it denialist, basically there are these countervailing tides right now that in many countries around the world that are getting in the way of things.
Yeah, sorry, it's because this is what I was referring to, actually, without saying it. So yeah, but I think that really education and, science is really important to use for these matters, and really explain very simply, have, again, I said it a lot, but comprehensive tools, transparent tools to explain to people what is happening is very important. And I really believe that events as Solve Climate by 2030 and also the Teachin can, bring a lot of different people from different backgrounds together, to discuss these challenges that we will face that we will face. And they maybe, they can also understand that we could, even if we have contradictions, we can discuss these contradictions actually, without denying them.
Well, this has been a really valuable conversation itself, and I think that you've hit on a lot of important themes as we're getting toward the end. So maybe one last thought from each of you on what's the next step. In other words, each of us knows a teacher, for sure, I'm sure, whether in our community or somewhere else in the world, who can get involved. But what's maybe a last word from each of you, starting with the student here, Darren, and down the chain, and then we'll try to schedule another one. I know you're doing your you have Eban this another briefing on November 3rd, I think. Is that the next one?
Yes, I'm sorry. We have information sessions first Wednesday of every month. We hold them at 10 a.m., 3 p.m., and 10 p.m. To sort of serve the world. So you can go to our website, worldwideteachin.org, and register for an information session to learn more about the project. We've got explanatory videos, one-pagers, and glad also to schedule one-on-one conversations. This kind of organizing, the first Earth Day in 1970, there were 20 million Americans who participated in a variety of educational teach-ins in and around that day. That's just mind-blowing, right? And that was done in the old-fashioned way by just face-to-face organizing, letters, phone calls, Mimeo machines. And the thing we really want to emphasize is that everybody does know a climate concerned teacher or a climate concerned student. And yet we're all inundated every day with a million requests and emergencies and give to this and do that. So really, in order for this thing to grow and sort of have the impact that it needs to have, people literally need to go up and grab their friends and say, look, you care about climate change. Here's a very effective strategy for you in the next year to engage dozens or hundreds of people in a good conversation about this. The one thing you have to do is go to one of these information sessions. So, not just sort of send them an email or post it on Facebook, but literally talk to them one-on-one and say, here, you've got to go hear about this project. Devote half an hour on a Wednesday morning in November. And if it gets you excited about it, then you can participate, right? But you owe it to yourself to find these opportunities where you can really have impact, because we don't have a lot of time. We do not get this year back. We do not get the next 5 years back. We can't put this off until 2023, 2024. We have to do it this year. And I know we can't live our lives on edge and sort of always be focused on climate change, but we need to find those things that are effective and powerful, right? And put those into our lives. And this is one of them. So once again, everybody knows a teacher, everybody knows a student. Grab those people. Tell them to come to one of our information sessions, Wednesday, 11/3, multiple times, worldwideteachin.org.
That's great. So let's just go around the room here one last time then. Darren, so what's the next step?
Next steps, I think I'm remembering a quote and I'm paraphrasing here, but basically the topics in education that suffer from neglect avenge themselves later on. And I think that there is all the more reason that if there is silence in these education classrooms or in classrooms in general around climate change, then we find ourselves where we are today. And so all the more reason to have these kinds of initiatives, bringing people together from these interdisciplinary backgrounds to discuss, to challenge, to find ways to include these topics into our conversations as professionals entering the field, in my situation and in others who are similar to me. And I know it will only be more prevalent as the younger generation comes and demands that their schooling, undergraduate degrees, graduate degrees become infused with climate change learning. So I think this is part of the process. I was going to say the beginning, but it's nowhere near the beginning. This is part of the process, and I think this is normal and very much needed. So I look forward to seeing how this comes to fruition, and I'm excited.
And Naciba in France?
Yeah, sorry. I think that there is a necessity today to develop a comprehensive tool to understand environmental impact and climate change, and in all disciplines and all programs, in high schools, universities, schools of management and engineering. And I believe that the Teachin will help do that. So if you want to join us, you're welcome. I'm the coordinator for Western Europe. So a lot of universities, Western universities have reached out. So don't hesitate to contact us to join us, because I really think it makes a difference.
Fantastic. And Chi in Taiwan, thank you again for being part of this, even at the odd times of your day.
Thank you for having me. So I think the key is to change, change in our daily behavior, change in our energy systems, and also in our change in our social media. And I think the global efforts, and thank you for the this podcast and the Eban, the awesome opens up opportunities. Because the global effort will make change in the local levels, will help us to support. We have support from here, and you have support from to have this opportunity to share experience. Yes. So
great. Well, we can do another round of this later in the year to help drive the conversation forward and to make sure it results in action. The key thing is there's this concept in economics, path dependency, and the fossil history has a lot of path dependency. We get stuck. Suburbia can't be uninvented quickly, but path dependency can be created in a positive direction as well. Some young scholars at Yale, Kelly Levin, wrote a big paper on this a long time ago that resonates still with me, meaning positive path dependency, where you build something that has momentum and shape that carries forward. And this is clearly one of those things. So thanks. It's been great to host this event today from the Columbia Climate School Sustain webcast. I'm Andy Revkin. And tune in, share this as soon as we're done. It's broadcast to Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and all those links get preserved. So whoever you are, if you're watching, share it with at least one person later, and that's a good way to keep things moving forward. And thanks to Eban Goodstein and Eric Greenberg, former colleague of mine who's helping you to organize this. Thanks to Naciba from France and Chi from Taiwan and Darren from Teachers College. And go forward and keep at it, and we'll tune back in. Thank you, Andy.
Let's all stay in touch.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.